One.
How goes it? What's going on, Israelites? Those that may not know they're Israelites, but are Israelites regardless. Um, Enemies of the other nation, whomever. The word of the Most High is particularly dedicated for Israel, but everyone will know the glory of our people, and more importantly, the glory of our Heavenly Father, the creator of the heavens and earth, everything beyond, and such as we don't know of, Yahweh. Tonight, we are continuing our Wednesday history lessons, and we were going forward from one of the last ones that I touched upon, which was Kings of Israel. And we are now actually, as we know about our nation, dividing that, and we are touching base today on all of the kings of the southern kingdom of Israel. So we're probably going to be here for a decent minute. Bear with me, bear with us, but it'll be good because you'll have a good, basic, general understanding without necessarily reading every scripture yourself about the kings of Judah, the southern kingdom, your so-called black people, so-called Native Americans, as we're going to, discover who encompass the kingdom of Judah. So let's get to it. So we last left off in the book of Kings, First Kings, dealing with Solomon, and all his great wisdom and such, and then his folly as well too. But Solomon had a son, his son had a son, and his son's sons had a son, and so on. And that first son from Solomon that became king after him, his name was Rehoboam. So what we're going to do here tonight too is, if you guys didn't know, we're going to be going in the books of First and Second Kings, where, as it's titled, you're going to find out these different kings among Israel. But we'll also be flipping between that book and First and Second Chronicles, because in case you haven't studied them yourself, some accounts between the Kings accounts and the Chronicles accounts give more details or less details about a particular king and his rulership and, a reign and such of that. So we will be definitely touching upon the four books, as we go on. But I'm going to do my best as far as you guys to summarize and explain and show scriptures. So let's get Rehoboam. We can get 1 Kings 12 and 1 to where we can get that scripture. Actually, 1 Kings 11 and 43. And then we could jump down to 12 and 1.
1 Kings chapter 11, verse 43. And Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his stead.
You could read chapter 12 and verse 1.
And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king.
All right, so Rehoboam. So we're going to get into his name. His name actually means a people enlarged, coming from the Hebrew word 7:346, a people enlarged. So Rehoboam is the first son to be a king from Solomon since the kingdom officially got split. I believe that was touched upon in another lesson. And that dealt with a prophet before. His name was actually Ahijah. Yep, Ahijah was the one that prophesied that unto Solomon and, his son as well too, Rehoboam. So Rehoboam, we're gonna summarize it like this. The king Rehoboam, he's most credited and known for this. As soon as he got in his kingdom of reigningship, the first thing that he did was he burdened the workload of what would become known as the Northern Kingdom, and a particular man whose name was Jeroboam. Jeroboam was Rehoboam's servant at the time, but he had actually fled off for some time into another country and came back. And then during that time of process, you know, the Most High was more so dealing with him. And actually, Jeroboam had ran off under Solomon's reign. So he used to be Solomon's servant. But now when Rehoboam was instated king, Jeroboam was now back on the scene in Israel. So as soon as Rehoboam became that, knowing what Ahijah had told his father about the two pieces of cloth that he prophesied with, we can actually read that in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 30 through 32.
1 Kings chapter 11, verse 30. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it in 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rent the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel.
Khan. So Jeroboam is going into Rehoboam's newly instated kingship, which at this point in time, Rehoboam is thinking he's king over all of Israel. And Jeroboam, through the prophet of the Most High, through the Lord, the man of God, he knows that actually he's going to be the king over 10 tribes specifically, and not over 2 in particular, which would be Judah and Benjamin. So Jeroboam already has foreknowledge of this. Rehoboam, to basically fulfill that prophecy, again, what he does is he begins to have a council, you know, about how to deal with the 10 tribes up in the north. Because if you guys didn't know geographically, Judah is in the south, encompassed with Benjamin and, you know, whatever Levites that are around as well too. So Rehoboam goes into a council with 2 sets of people, his peers, which are, you know, everyone around his age, so, you know, more so middle-aged men and such like that, you know, 30s, 40s, possibly 50s, and then council as well with elders, you know, elders being, you know, in their 60s and up. Between those 2 councils of what to do with the northern kingdom, as far as how to deal with them, you know, since knowing that Jeroboam had left, you know, and knowing that these 10 tribes would sort of be I want to say like a colony, like a vassal state, and still trying to be under Rehoboam's rule. So Rehoboam decides to go with the counsel of his peers, which is to actually make their workload more burdensome, as if to show dominance, you know, over them. Whereas the elders of Rehoboam said, nah, you should lighten it, and then, you know, they're going to be more so at peace with you and want to actually work with you. But we know that wasn't necessarily the case as far as how the Most High wanted things to go down. So Rehoboam, you know, in his heart, and the Most High knowing the hearts of men and controlling all that, chooses to listen to his peers and actually makes their yoke harder. We can actually read that in 1 Kings 12 and 11.
1 Kings chapter 12, verse 11. And now, whereas my father did lade you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father had chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions.
Read down.
So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the 3rd day, as the king had appointed, saying, come to me again the 3rd day. And the king answered the people roughly, and forsook the old men's counsel that they gave him, and spake to them after the counsel of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, and I will add to your yoke. My father also chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions.
Con. Continue on. Read verse 15.
Wherefore the king hearkened not unto the people, for the cause was from the Lord, that he might perform his saying, which the Lord spake by Ahijah the Shilonite unto Jeroboam the son of Nebat.
Right. So again, that verse right there, verse 15. Knowing that, hey, Kanash, you want to get the door? Knowing that, that this prophecy had to get fulfilled so that Rehoboam could basically have the kingdom divided, whether of not dealing with his will or not. That's what had to be done. And now what's going to go down is because Rehoboam made that decision, we find that the northern kingdom of Israel rebels. They rebel against Rehoboam's reign. They stone one of his messengers and servants and such like that. And so Rehoboam, while he's having this meeting in Shechem, and Shechem is actually, Shechem is a very important place in the northern kingdom. I believe Shechem is like the capital, dealing with Ephraim and such like that. So Rehoboam visiting Shechem, to deal with the northern kingdom, his servant gets stoned, and now he and his government there, they flee and they leave, and they basically make home base again in Judah. And now Rehoboam, he's gathering Judah and Benjamin and the Levites with him, to assemble basically as the half of that kingdom. The southern kingdom essentially starts right there. And the northern kingdom, by that same regard, starts right there as well too. Now let me see if I can get something written in this second book of Chronicles. Bear with me one second. Some more information. Dun-dun-dun. Con. Okay, so let's get just get understanding that Levi, most of the tribes of Levi too, went with Rehoboam as well too. We can get 2 Chronicles chapter 11 and verse 13. Mm-hmm.
2 Chronicles chapter 11, verse 13. And the priests and the Levites that were in all Israel resorted to him out of all their coasts. For the Levites left their suburbs and their possession and came to Judah and Jerusalem, for Jeroboam and his son had cast them off from executing the priest office unto the Lord. And he ordained him priest for the high places and for the devils and for the calves which he had made. And after them, out of all the tribes of Israel, such as set their hearts to seek the Lord God of Israel, came to Jerusalem to sacrifice unto the Lord God of their fathers.
So we're not really supposed to and going to touch into the details of what the northern kingdom was doing parallel during this time, but it is important just to know some things. So as soon as the northern kingdom under Jeroboam rebelled from Rehoboam's reign, part of their tactic to keep them separate was that the northern kingdom couldn't allow the 10 tribes that were amongst them to go into Judah to worship the Most High, to worship the Lord, because that was actually a law, and we're going to bring out that law during the lesson later too, because this is a law that was actually looked over a lot between both tribes. But the northern kingdom under Jeroboam at that time, to have power, prevented travel into the southern kingdom with their peoples by creating pretty much in their own vein replicas to honor other gods, and even try to honor the Most High himself by creating idols and stuff such as that, and copying the design that the southern kingdom had with the house and the place of the Most High. But the Levites, knowing that that was not correct, they weren't going for that. They weren't conforming with that, so they actually got kicked out and had the foresight to know to leave and to really all gather to the southern kingdom. So this is the aspect now where the Levites scattered and spread through all of Israel. For the most part, most of them all start to home base now in Judah and in the southern kingdom, because they're there and trained to do the work of the Lord, not what Jeroboam had now tried to instill and instate with, which becomes idolatry. So that's where we get the understanding now at the beginning of the southern kingdom being Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. And as well as, too, it reads that those of the northern kingdom of Israel who really felt it in their hearts, whether they were Simeon, Ephraim, Reuben, Gad, Issachar, Zebulun, whoever, those few that felt it a need to come to the southern kingdom, they went as well, too, and got assimilated into, that culture of the southern kingdom. So you have those remnants that were there. But for the bulk of it, of NK, Northern Kingdom, 10 tribes, they stayed where they were at under Jeroboam's rule. So that's a highlight, one other highlight about Rehoboam. Another thing about Rehoboam that you need to know, which we're going to flip over in 1 Kings 2, Rehoboam did not... he didn't follow you're going to see this pattern too. He didn't follow the heart of the Most High perfectly. You see, what Solomon did by allowing the idolatry into the kingdom, which still existed in this time, Rehoboam did not actually remove any of that as a king. He allowed a lot of that to stay. And we're going to get that right now. Let's get 1 Kings chapter 14, and we're going to read 21 down to at least 24. We're going to get a lot of scriptural evidence tonight, Most High willing, and not just me talking.
1 Kings chapter 14, verse 21, and Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord did choose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah and Ammonitis.
Okay.
And Judah did evil in the sight of the Lord, and they provoked him to jealousy with their sins, which they had committed above all that their fathers had done.
At this point in time. Noted. Continue.
For they also built them high places and images and groves on every high hill and under every green tree. And there were also Sodomites in the land, and they did according to all the abominations of the nations which the Lord cast out before the children of Israel.
So again, right there, these were practices that were already beginning and had started with Solomon, but under Rehoboam, because he didn't do anything about it, and it says that Israel was doing wickedly because no one was doing anything about it. We see that these this idolatry continues within the kingdom. The two aspects, the building the high places, which is not where the Most High designated, and as well as the images and the idolatry with these high places. And then, custom by custom that falls off after with that, you have the Sodomites that are attached to these idols and high places and groves and stuff like that. And you got to get the understanding too that when you look up the word sodomite, it's actually talking about a temple prostitute. So these were definitely pagan priests that dealt with the pagan practices, such as the goddess Ashtaroth, the fertility goddess, where the main thing is having sex. So these were temple prostitutes, both men and women, committing all acts of lewdness that you could think of, from adultery, regular fornication, homosexuality, bestiality, all that, according to the worship of whatever particular image and god that Rehoboam had allowed in Judah at this time. You know, this was, again, we're dealing with the southern kingdom. This is all the things that were happening right now during Rehoboam's reign. So all that still continued. All that still continued. And let's read some of the after effects of that because of what Rehoboam allowed. Verse 25.
Verse 25, and it came to pass in the 5th year of King Rehoboam that Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem. And he took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He even took away all, and he took away all the shields of gold which Solomon had made. Mm-hmm. And King Rehoboam made in their stead brass and shield, and committed them unto the hands of the chief of the guard, which kept the door of the king's house. And it was so, when the king went into the house of the Lord, that the guard bare them and brought them back into the guard chamber.
And verse 29.
Now the rest of the acts of Rehoboam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Judah?
So now, because of, those particular highlights, the history of what was going down and what Rehoboam did not remove from the kingdom, the Most High rose up that Egyptian king, Shishak, to pillage the temple or the house of God from a lot of the gold, a lot of the gold that was in that. And that's going to be an ongoing pattern that seems to be going on. So under Rehoboam's rule, we had lost items from the temple of the Most High to one of these kings of Egypt. And then, as it was such, Rehoboam, he passed on. He had kids, and we're going on to his next kid. So just keep that in mind. These things in the kingdom, or in the southern kingdom, are still going down, and these things trickle. So now we're on to our second king. That was a general synopsis of Rehoboam. The next is Abijam. His name comes from the Hebrew 38, and his name actually means father of the seas. Ab, and then, or Abai, and then Jam. That part. Ab means, father, Abba, and then Ajam. I don't know the Hebrew paleo for that, but that part means seas, the ocean. So his name actually means father of the seas. So we're going to start first with 1 Kings 15:1, if you want to read that, please.
1 Kings chapter 15, verse 1. Now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, reigned Abijam over Judah. 3 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom.
Verse 3.
And he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had done before him, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father. Nevertheless, for David's sake did the Lord his God give him a lamp in Jerusalem to set up his son after him and to establish Jerusalem. Because David did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord and turned not aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, save only in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. And there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all the days of his life. Now the rest of the acts of Abijam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And there was war between Abijam and Jeroboam.
So, that First Kings account is definitely the shortened aspect of it. You can read definitely the longer of it in 2 Chronicles 13:1. Maybe we could pick some things out. But Abijam, he didn't change off from his father's issues or sins. He actually he continued in them. He didn't make it any better. He didn't necessarily make it any worse, but he continued in the worstness of it by allowing a lot of those same things to continue within Judah, which is, the biggest things is these high places and with the idols on there, and then all the temple prostitutes, sodomites that are along with it. Abijam didn't do anything with that. And also as well, too, we see that Jeroboam still being king at this time, he actually had war with the northern kingdom king, Jeroboam, all throughout his life. So as part of his judgment, with the Most High, the northern kingdom was likened unto a heathen nation to Abijam's rulership, whereas, they were constantly going at it, territory, land, and such. There was not any peace between the southern kingdom and northern kingdom under Abijam's reign, because he kept all the same things going down. Let's get the book of 2 Chronicles and pick out some things real quick. Yeah, chapter 13 has pretty much the details of that war between Abijah and Jeroboam in 2 Chronicles chapter 13. So you can, let's just get one snippet out of this. Let's read chapter 13, verse 4 through 9 in 2 Chronicles.
2 Chronicles chapter 13, verse 4, and Abijah stood up upon Mount Zemaraim, which is in Mount Ephraim, and said, Hear me thou, Jeroboam, and all Israel. Ought you not to know that the Lord God of Israel gave the kingdom over Israel to David forever, even to him and to his sons, by a covenant of Saul?
So Abijam is just trying to remind the northern kingdom, Israel, about how things were going down when things were cool, when David was ruling, 2 or 3 generations up, when the kingdom was one. Continue.
Yet Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, the servant of Solomon, the son of David, is risen up and hath rebelled against his Lord. And there are gathered unto him vain men of children of Belial, and have strengthened themselves against Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, when Rehoboam was young and tenderhearted and could not withstand them. And now ye think to withstand the kingdom of the Lord in the hand of the sons of David, and ye be a great multitude, and there are with you golden calves, which Jeroboam made you for gods.
And verse 9. Yep.
Have ye not cast out the priests of the Lord, the sons of Aaron, and the Levites, and have made you priests after the manner of the nations of other lands, so that whosoever cometh to consecrate himself with a young bullock and 7 rams, the same may be a priest of them that are no gods?
So, Abijam is just giving, the whole speech to the northern kingdom. Generally, every time they made battle, and they still kept going to war with each other, but it fell upon deaf ears. So again, you guys can read that sometime yourselves. 2 Chronicles, the rest of chapter 13. Now let's get to just so we can end that 2 Chronicles 13 and 22, just so we know that he passed.
Verse 22, and the rest of the acts of Abijah and his ways and his sayings are written in the story of the prophet Iddo.
Yep, and he slept with his fathers, as a king as such. So that was our second king of the southern kingdom, Abijam, father of the seas. His son now, the third, his name is Asa. Let's get 1 Kings 15 and 9.
1 Kings chapter 15, verse 9. And in the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, reigned Asa over Judah.
So Asa, his name comes from Hebrew 609. His name actually means healer. And that as a name is actually going to be very prominent to and reflective of his kingship, because just as a foreshadow, a lot of these kings of the southern kingdom, their names don't necessarily reflect the quality of their rulership, unfortunately. But you do have a few that do, and Asa is definitely one of those kings. So, duh, duh, duh. You can read verse 11 in that same chapter, 1 Kings 15 and 11.
And Asa did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, as did David his father. And he took away the Sodomites out of the land and removed all the idols that his father had made.
Yep, keep going.
And also Maacah, his mother, even her, he removed from being queen because she had made an idol in a grove, and Asa destroyed her idol and burnt it by the brook Kidron.
All right, so Asa, so far, as we're reading scriptures, it says that his heart was perfect, like unto David. Almost. He wasn't quite there yet. But in the sense that under his reign and rulership, he had removed the idols that were dealing with, the idols that are on these high places, the images and the groves and such. And as well as the Sodomite priests that were with them. He starts to not only remove those idols, but them as well, too, that are paying homage to them by their, generally most say their lewd acts, and witchcraft, all that. That comes all, it's all one bundle, And it also says, too, that he stopped his mom from almost becoming a queen, because that's another thing that we're going to deal with, dealing with the Southern Kingdom too. But he prevented that the first time that almost happened was his own mother. And if you guys know anything about how things are going today in this world and parallel to back then, oftentimes the women, when it comes to, idolatry, you hear doctrines like, the women is God and stuff like that. And you have a lot of men out here, especially in I would say so-called black community, and which makes sense because this is just an issue that we carry along in our bloodlines, from these times. But you have a lot of these things going down to where you have women worship by, other women and men strictly for the sake of the power that they receive in doing what they do with their idols. That main power comes from sex, though, which is dealing again with the temple prostitutes or sodomites. So that's how his mother almost potentially became a queen over Judah and the Southern Kingdom when all the Israelites were, as we see in Abijah and Rehoboam's reign, practicing those things. That power wickedly almost got shifted to her. But Asa, walking in the way of the Most High and the Lord, he actually stops those things, in their tracks and, removes a lot, most of that. But continue, verse 14 in that same chapter.
But the high places were not removed. Nevertheless, Asa, his heart was perfect with the Lord all his days.
So save that, the high places not being removed, Asa did essentially, I don't want to say perfect, but a very good job with the Most High. Because something you got to understand, which is going to keep happening repetitively, when these high places are not removed, it leads to idolatry and groves and images, and then the sodomites and such like that. And these high places are pretty much, did you have something, Hawashai? Khan, yep, and that's definitely what Asa's mother was, in the process of becoming, as well as these, the Sodomites as well too, because they were, if you study some of that, sometimes they were seen as the embodiments of, those gods that they're worshiping, but I mean, it's them, you essentially are worshiping them in the false name of whatever spirit, whatever spirit you're dealing with. Right, but these high places, the issue with them, I want to actually grab a precept with you real quick, some precepts, and I want to explain it too. Oh, shit, I don't have those precepts right here, Ronnie. Let me just explain it. I will get them later because we're going to come upon this a lot. These high places, the issue with them is the Most High back in the day, before we got into the land, when the Most High said that he was there, we did make sacrifices and oblations to the Most High in various different, high places in our history. You read like in Genesis, you read about places like, Jehovah Jireh and just certain, mountains with the Most High's name in it. Because that's where we were. That's where the Most High was, his spirit was at that time at that particular place. But as we move forward into the future, after Solomon had built the temple, the Most High specifically said that this is where I'm going to dwell. All those other places beforehand, that's not where I'm at anymore. This is where I'm at. So the issue is, and you find this in the law in Deuteronomy 12, the Most High says wherever it is that he dwells, that's where you're going to do your sacrifices and oblations unto him. Anywhere else is unlawful. So you might think that what I'm doing, I'm making a peace offering right now in in the mountains in San Diego or the Los Angeles forest, just on a modern day tip. But even so back then and even to this day, although it's different because we don't have the temple and we're scattered, but you couldn't do that. You were supposed to come to the designated place, which the northern kingdom knew was in Jerusalem. And that's why Jeroboam did what he did. But you couldn't just go anywhere to honor the Most High, specifically at a high place, because Mount Zion with the temple is on a high place. That is a mountain, but that's the mountain the Most High chose. He didn't choose the mountain you wanted. He chose the mountain he wanted. So that's the issue with these high places that we're going to keep finding out that weren't necessarily removed, but also prompted a lot of the idolatry still. So Asa, again, coming back to it, Asa did not remove that. But he did remove a lot of the customs and idolatry that came along with it. So now, going on, 1 Kings 22 and 41, Asa's son and what his name is from that. 1 Kings chapter 22 and verse 41. Yeah, we had to cut through a lot of 1 Kings because that's going into a lot of the northern kingdom.
1 Kings chapter 22, verse 21. And there came forth a spirit and stood before the Lord.
41, verse 41 in that chapter.
Verse 41, and Jehoshaphat, the son of Asa, began to reign over Judah in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Shilhi.
Okay, so now we have our 4th king, Jehoshaphat. His name comes from the Hebrew 3092, and his name means Yahweh makes the judgment. Yahweh, and Shaphat meaning that judgment. As we're going to see and pick upon, points and pieces of scripture, we're going to see that Jehoshaphat, like his father Asa, he walked perfect like him. So we got Jehoshaphat doing very well as a king of Judah during this time. So he walked like his father Asa, and Asa walked as closely as he could to David. So Jehoshaphat was a decent and good king. But much like Asa, walking in his footsteps, he also did not remove the high places. So again, these high places are still there, and people are still making sacrifices to the Most High there, which is still breaking the law. But that's one thing that he did not actually end up getting rid of. We could read that verse 43 in that same chapter that you were in.
Verse 43, and he walked in all the ways of Asa his father.
Good.
He turned not aside from it, doing that which was right in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away, for the people offered and burnt incense, yet in the high places.
To the Most High. But No different than you can't offer the Most High the wrong type of incense. You can't worship or you can't sacrifice unto the Most High in the wrong kind of place. Same thing. So Jehoshaphat, another important thing about him too is we see that unlike Abijam, which was 2 generations up, he actually had peace with the northern kingdom of Israel. Let's get to the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 17. Okay, Second Chronicles chapter 17 and Jehoshaphat. That's 2 Chronicles chapter 19, verse 1 through 3. Okay, so we're just going to get that proof of, the peace that Jehoshaphat had with who the king was at this time. His name was Ahab. So hopefully you guys will learn about him another time. But this was the king that, despite when you know about Ahab, you know about Ahab. But despite that, Jehoshaphat had mutual peace between our kingdoms at this time. So you can read that again in 2 Chronicles 19, 1 through 3.
2 Chronicles chapter 19, verse 1, and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, returned to his house in peace to Jerusalem. And Jehu, the son of Hanani, the seer, went out to meet him and said to the king Jehoshaphat, shouldest thou help the ungodly and love them that hate the Lord? Therefore is wrath upon thee from before the Lord. Nevertheless, there are good things found in thee, and that thou hast taken away the groves out of the land and hast prepared thine heart to seek God.
Read on one more.
And Jehoshaphat dwelt at Jerusalem, and he went out again through the people from Beersheba to Mount Ephraim and brought them back unto the Lord God of their fathers.
So, again, that peace wasn't necessarily, because when you understand in the chapters you'll read in 2 Chronicles, a few chapters before, Jehoshaphat actually went to war with the king of the northern kingdom at this time. And, they met up at a place called Ramoth Gilead. And this particular prophet, Jehu, not the king, but this prophet named Jehu, he speaks to Jehoshaphat saying, like, look, why would you go, and join yourself onto someone like that? That wasn't, wise. And so much so that, you're still going to get judged for doing that. The scriptures do make it point out and clearly that we're not supposed to dwell and even, really associate on that type of level with the ungodly. So it doesn't bring anything, it doesn't bring any prosperous from the Most High. The Most High would rather have you separate from them so that hopefully they can get it right on their own, but, you don't get caught up in the mix. But that's why that prophet Jehu said, nevertheless, there's still good things that I find about you. You're walking in your father, you're removing the idols, the idolatry, the customs that come along all with that. And you're doing a decent job in comparison to your first two predecessors, Rehoboam and Abijam. So, he gave them, what do you say? I guess that cookie, right there. But again, that's some of the main highlights of Jehoshaphat. And also, too, what he did was he completely, at this point in time, removed the remnants of any Sodomites, temple prostitutes that existed in Jerusalem at that time, in Jerusalem, Judah as well, too, during that time. So that's what Jehoshaphat did in his kingdomship reign that we read between those two books in 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles. So you can read 2 Chronicles 20 and 34 to close out that king.
2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 34. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, first and last, behold, they are written in the book of Jehu, the son of Hanani, who was mentioned in the book of the kings of Israel. And after this, did Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, join himself with Ahaziah, king of Israel, who did very wickedly.
That's another completely different matter. But this particular Jehoshaphat, he passed. So his time was up. So now we're going to go to our next king in 2 Kings chapter 18 and verse 16. Is that
Second Kings or first?
18 and 16. I believe First Kings, because it's looking like too early for Hezekiah. So let me check First Kings. No, let's actually just go right now. Second Chronicles 21 and 5. I'm gonna look for that right now. But 21 and 5, Second Chronicles.
2 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 5, Jehoram was 32 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem.
So our next king, when we read the scriptures in Second Kings and Second Chronicles, just a discrepancy so you guys don't get confused when you do read it on your own. This particular king is called by two different names, and he's not going to be the first one either. No different that we have nicknames. Our people were dealing with that too. So he goes by Jehoram and also Joram. So that comes from the Hebrew 3088, and that just means for both names, Yahweh is lifted, or Yahweh is exalted. Jehoram or Joram, like an abbreviation, a nickname of that. So, let me check again back with that. I usually like to go with the king's accounts. They're a little bit more brief. So they have 2 Kings 8 and 16, but that's not where that's at. Athaliah, it's too far. So let me go back. Okay, cool. 2 Kings 8 and 16. Yep, that's where I want to be at. Where were you at earlier?
18.
Oh, 18. My bad. Yeah, I meant 8 and 16. I probably read that wrong myself.
2 Kings chapter 8, verse 16. And in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoshaphat being then king of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, began to reign.
So that's where I want to bring us in. So now, to give you the points and the bullet points, Jehoram or Joram, he was not going to be walking in the righteousness and uprightness of a couple of his forefathers. In fact, we're going to see he walked very wickedly in the likeness of his cousins, or our brothers of the northern kingdom, particularly of Ahab. So let's read that. You can read 18 and down, same chapter. 2 Kings 8 and 18 and down.
Verse 18, and he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as did the house of Ahab, for the daughter of Ahab was his wife, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet the Lord would not destroy Judah for David his servant's sake, as he promised to give to him always a light, and to his children. In the days of Edom, revolted from under the hand of Judah, and made a king over themselves.
So that was one of the problems that, or rather, one of the judgments that the Most High allowed under Jehoram's reign was that the Edomites, they rebelled. They used to be at this time before servants, willing servants, but because of Jehoram's sin and walking like and with Ahab, the Most High rose up the king of Edom to rebel against Judah and Jerusalem during this time. So that was one of the main things. And we're going to see too a little bit more just what he was punished. You got to get this is why you got to flip between these two books, because First Kings keep it very short and brief, but Second Chronicles, we're going to get back to right now, verse 21 and 5, is going to go into a few more details that is just important to know. So let's get there. Second Chronicles chapter 21, and I'm going to direct you from there when we get in there. Second Chronicles chapter 21 and verse 12. So now, because Jehoram is doing as wickedly as Ahab, he's going to have a prophet prophesy against him. So you can start at verse 12.
Second Chronicles chapter 21, verse 12. And there came a writing to him from Elijah the prophet, saying, Thus saith the Lord God of David thy father, because thou hast not walked in the ways of Jehoshaphat thy father, nor in the ways of Asa king of Judah, but hast walked in the way of the kings of Israel, and hast made Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to go a-whoring, like to the whoredoms of the house of Ahab, and also hast slain thy brethren of thy father's house, which were better than thyself.
Continue.
Behold, with a great plague will the Lord smite thy people, and thy children, and thy wives, and all thy goods.
And verse 15.
And thou shalt have great sickness by disease of thy bowels, until thy bowels fall out, by reason of the sickness day by day.
So we read that this king Jehoram, he was so wicked and evil, like unto Ahab, with all the idolatry and everything that comes along with idolatry, doing that in Jerusalem. He was wicked to the point to where he killed off his siblings, particularly his brothers, so that more than likely there wouldn't be a conspiracy about him to put him out of his rulership. But yeah, he killed his own family members during this time as well too. So the Most High said, you're being so wicked that his judgment, along with Edom rebelling against him, the Most High said, I'm going to smite you with a plague. No different than what you hear about, really, like very similar to AIDS today. But he says, I'm going to smite you with a plague, with your bowels, and that's going to die. You're going to die from that. And the details of the scripture says that in the process of him having that disease, his bowels actually came out. You can imagine people have kidney stones that come out of a very awkward place, but his actual bowels, his intestines, and probably everything like that, that's how plagued and diseased, and that's how he died. That's how this particular king died, was from that bowel disease the Most High gave him. It's very similar to, the unexplained diseases that you see that we have today between cancer and AIDS and what's happening, COVID-19, all of that, in the likeness. So that was pretty much what happened to Jehoram. Another thing, too, the Most High also raised up the Philistines and the Arabians against him, too. But we don't have to necessarily get that written in the scriptures, but when you do read that, you will know that. So he had a bunch of war during his king reign around him and about him, and died such as like that. And, as it keeps saying in the scriptures, and, he slept with his fathers and such like that. Matter of fact, I don't even know if he was actually buried with his fathers. Some of these kings did so bad that they weren't necessarily buried with, the rest of their forefathers. Well, let's continue on to the next king, though. 2 Chronicles 22 and verse 1.
2 Chronicles chapter 22, verse 1. And the inhabitants of Jerusalem made Ahaziah, his youngest son, king in his stead.
Jehoram's son. Is that it?
King in his stead, for the band of men that came with the Arabians to the camp had slain all the eldest. So Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, reigned.
Okay, so that's just that little detail. So again, some of those nations of people the Most High raised up against his father, Jehoram, were one of the ones that killed his eldest son. So one of the youngest sons, Ahaziah, becomes king over Jerusalem now. Now, Ahaziah, his name means, from the Hebrew 274, it means Yahweh has seized or caught or held on to. That's what his name means. And this particular king, bullet points, he did evil, no different like his father, the evil that was like unto Ahab. So we keep bringing up this particular king, Ahab. Just know that he's very famous when it comes to Northern Kingdom rulership. So he did evil much like unto Ahab. And it was actually one of the reasons with that was because he was his son-in-law. So Ahaziah was Ahab's son-in-law, and I believe that Jehoram was Ahab's son, or at least married. No, Jehoram was married to one of Ahab's daughters. And now we see that during his time, he was confederate with the Northern Kingdom. He didn't separate himself from them. And one of the things that they were confederate towards was going to war against Syria. So now, Southern Kingdom and Northern Kingdom have a treaty going on, a treaty and wickedness in the eyes of the Most High to fight against who's warring against both of them now, the Syrian nation of people. So you're going to see this pattern happening on and off a lot, dealing with these Southern Kingdom kings. So that's what's going on. But now one of the important things is with Ahaziah, there's a man that's from the Northern Kingdom. His name is Jehu, and we're not going to go there because we're going to keep going on. But this man named Jehu is, without giving too much detail, he kills Ahaziah due to his wickedness. This man named Jehu, that's from the Northern Kingdom, he ends up killing Ahaziah. So Ahaziah's rulership and his reign and his confederacy with the Northern Kingdom becomes cut short. So now, after Ahaziah's death, we see somewhat of a filler, because we're dealing with the kings of Judah, right? But this particular event happened, 2 Kings 11 and 1. We see that we had a previous king that prevented a queen over Israel, but now after Ahaziah's death and his wickedness that he allowed all of Jerusalem and Judah to do with the idols and the high places and the groves and the sodomites and the temple prostitutes, we see that this woman comes into power named Athaliah. 2 Kings 11 and 1.
2 Kings chapter 11, verse 1. And when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed royal. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and staled him from among the king's sons which were slain. And they hid him, even him and his nurse, in a bedchamber from Athaliah, so that he was not slain.
So Athaliah, Ahaziah's evil mom for her evil son, she now becomes, for a period of time, And I believe this is going to be 6 years. She becomes for 6 whole years, almost a decade, the queen over Jerusalem and Judah, over Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. She's queen. The nation or the southern kingdom is, beginning to become further into ruin and turmoil because of the position she's in, because of the things that she's continuing to allow. So she's just, queen of idolatry during this time. So Athaliah, her name comes from Hebrew 6:27-1, and her main name means Yahweh has constrained or squeezed. And I like to say I want to get some wisdom out of that, but the Most High is definitely squeezing the southern kingdom at this time by allowing the different wars to happen, such as with the Assyrians and previously with the Edomites and the other nations too. So, that comfort isn't there. That squeezing amongst the kingdom by the Most High's hand for judgment is happening, such as her name does apply. But some things to know about her: she's actually the daughter of a northern kingdom Israelite. So she's not necessarily Benjamin, Levi, or Judah. She's actually the daughter of Omri, and I believe Omri is he's not Ephraim, but he's one of the northern kingdom kings. But at the end of the day, she's Israel. So we read too that what she did so that she could remain in power, she killed all of Ahaziah's sons. So she killed her son's sons. So she killed her grandsons. She killed, as she thought, all of her grandsons so that she could remain in power. But there was one, which was her granddaughter saved one of her grandsons, which is, a brother-sister thing. And his particular name was Joash. So that was the one she did not get to. She could not enforce that murder to. So, again, Athaliah, she's king for this time. But that one that she did not get to killing, when he becomes not necessarily old enough, but at least of age to start thinking, which is around the age of 6 or 8, then what happens was there's a high priest. So pretty much to put it in layman's terms, if you've ever seen Star Wars, when the Empire, with Darth Vader and everything, when they rule, when their evil is ruling the galaxy and such like that, there's a rebellion, or there's a resistance rather. The resistance under Athaliah was under a man named Jehodiah, and he was actually a high priest. So he was lying, lying back with, a rebellion for the right time to remove her so that the Most High's order could, be put into place. So that's what Jehodiah and, everyone under him as high priest, a Levite, was doing during those 6 years. So finally now when the one son was old enough to at least be instated as king, Jehodiah, much like the Maccabees, because, they were Levites too, he stages a coup against her. He literally sets up, a whole staged up coup to where she couldn't escape. You guys can read that in the book of throughout 2 Kings chapter 11 and 12. We won't really go there, but he sets that up to put her out of place, out of power, killing her and everyone with her. And Jehodiah then instates that son she did not get to, whose name is Joash, which we're now going to get into, as king. So big props to the high priest during this time, tumultuous time with no king at all, Jehodiah, the high priest, which led into now our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, our 7th king, Joash or Jehoash. And his name means Yahweh is fast, or like a consuming fire. So 2 Kings chapter 11 and verse 21. We want to get that.
1 Kings chapter 11, verse 21. 7 years old was Jehoash when he began to reign. In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash began to reign, and 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zibiah, of Beersheba.
Verse 2.
And Jehoash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all his days, wherein Jehoiada the priest instructed him. But the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places. And Jehoash said to the priest, all the money of the dedicated things that is brought into the house of the Lord.
That's fine. You don't have to read that. Okay, so Jehoash. Interesting about him. So at this time, you know, he's one of the youngest kings. He's 7 years old when he's instated, and so long as the days of Jehoiada, the high priest that staged the rebellion against Athaliah, the queen of the southern kingdom, he was doing good and he was doing right. So he did all that was right in the eyes of the Most High, save that he did not remove the people from sacrificing on the high places. That was the only thing that, again, we see a lot of these kings that they did not end up doing. But now, and also a good thing that he did too, which you were getting into, Jehoash, he pressed the high priest at this time during the priesthood in general, to restore the temple of the Most High, because at this point in time, 6, 7 kings in, the temple had been being destroyed and pillaged because of the other nations that the Most High was raising up against Judah and Jerusalem during these times. So Joash, also known as Jehoash. So again, so you guys know, it's a matter of he has 2 nicknames. It's Joash and Jehoash. That's not 2 separate kings. When you go and read it yourself, they're the same king. He raises money for the priesthood so they can reinstate and rebuild the breaches in the temple. Now the thing about him, so we can keep going on for the pressing of time, so I can just summarize it. As soon as the high priest Jehoiada, as soon as he died, Jehoash, he had a very abrupt and sudden change of heart. As soon as the high priest that mentored him, that got him through, and built him up as a kid, when he died, Joash did a complete 360, and he began. I can only explain and imagine is just following his, his curiosity, which led to him bringing back idolatry and everything that comes along with it, the high places, the idolatry, the temple prostitutes, the sodomites, the witchcraft, all that. He starts bringing that back into Israel as soon as Jehoiada, who counseled him, he dies. Even so much as bad as that, when Jehoiada, the high priest, the Levite, his son begins to prophesy against Joash, not even respecting his son, Jehoiada's son, for being his son, but Joash eventually he commences an order to have, and this guy's name is Zedekiah, the son of Jehoiada. He commences him to be stoned, just so that the idolatry and the wickedness that he wasn't necessarily taught to do by Jehoiada could continue. So that was the complete 360-degree or 180-degree turn that Jehoash, the young king instated at 7, did, essentially almost as a slap to the Most High's face and Jehoiada, the high priest's face, by doing that. Let's get that in. Let's go to 2 Chronicles 24. And that'll be the only thing I want to bring out, just so you guys could read that yourselves, because again, he was doing fine, this particular king, until Jehoiada passed away. Second Chronicles chapter 24 and verse 15.
2 Chronicles chapter 24, verse 15. But Jehoiada waxed old and was full of days when he died, and 130 years old was he when he died. And they buried him in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good in Israel, both towards God and towards his house.
As a Levite. Continue.
And after the death of Jehoiada came the prince of Judah and made obeisance to the king. Then the king hearkened unto them. And they left the house of the Lord God of their fathers and served groves and idols. And wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for this their trespass.
So just so you guys knew the proof in the pudding in the scriptures. So everything that I said about that happens after, including Jehoiada's son, Zedekiah, that begins to happen where he is put to death by stoning just for the sake of telling Joash that you shouldn't be doing those things, even though you should know better. But now we see too, during this time, so Joash's death for doing that, there's actually a conspiracy against him. So his peers, we can read in verse 21 of that same chapter, his peers conspire against him and, they kill him. So you can read that in verse 21 in that same chapter, please.
And they conspired against him and stoned him with stones at the commandment of the king in the court of the house of the Lord.
That was actually Zedekiah's death. Excuse me. Yeah, that was Zedekiah's death with that. Establish. Okay, so let's continue on. Let's continue on to the next king, which is Amaziah. So 2 Chronicles chapter 25 and verse 1.
2 Chronicles chapter 25, verse 1. Amaziah was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jehoiada of Jerusalem. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, but not with a perfect heart. Now it came to pass, when the kingdom was established to him, that he slew his servants that had killed the kings his father, but he slew not their children, but did as it is written in the law of the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, saying, the father shall not die for the children, neither shall the children die for the fathers, but every man shall die for his own sin.
So Amaziah, he kills, or he instructs the execution of those who conspired and killed his father, because much like David with Solomon, even David put to death the one that said he had killed Solomon, and and that still wasn't right, because that was the Most High's anointed, and that was something that was still carried on, even though much like and I didn't mean Solomon, I meant Saul. Even though Saul was wicked, and even though Amaziah's father became wicked at the end, that was still who the Most High chose. So he still had to execute that judgment, even on those that made the conspiracy to remove him when Joash began to turn that 180-degree backwards from turning his back on the Most High. So Amaziah's name means the courage of Yahweh, from Hebrew 5:5-8. And again, he does good. He does good. He doesn't do perfect like to David, but he does do good like a couple of the other kings that we mentioned. And one of the main things was that he goes to war with Edom, because Edom had a couple kings back rebelled against Israel. So now he begins taking upon that burden that is left to him. And Unfortunately, when he does do that, we're going to see in scriptures, when Amaziah does make that war with Edom, much like unto his father, he learns the customs of those Edomites and actually brings back those idols to Jerusalem and starts worshiping those idols. So he starts off good, and then he falls off and he fades off doing bad. So he got seduced into the customs and the idolatry of those of the Edomites. So you read about that in 2 Chronicles chapter 25. So we're not going to touch on that, but take my word for that and read that chapter about Amaziah's strong start and then his fall off into idolatry. So after that, Amaziah, he's not conspired against necessarily, but he does die like all of these kings do. And then now his son is going to become king too. And we can read that in 2 Chronicles 26:1.
Second Chronicles chapter 26, verse 1. Then all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in a room of his father Amaziah.
Okay, so another discrepancy that you guys just want to know when you guys are reading these books, 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles, all of them, these, recorded chronicle books, Uzziah is the same as Azariah. So in 2 Kings, you're going to see the king's name, from this point in time, named as Azariah. But in 2 Chronicles, you're going to see his name as Uzziah. So when you read with reasoning, you see that these are actually two of the same people, but just different titles. Azariah means Yahweh has helped, and Uzziah just means the force of Yahweh. So those two different names are actually the same person, the same king. So bullet points with this king: he does right in the eyes of the Most High. What he does, namely, he actually starts building the infrastructure, rebuilding the infrastructure of Jerusalem and Judah. And what we're actually going to see is he's one of the first people written about in scriptures that made engine-powered weapons. So we're going to get that in 2 Chronicles 26 and verse 15.
2 Chronicles chapter 26, verse 15. And he made in Jerusalem engines invented by cunning men to be on the towers and upon the bulwarks to shoot arrows and great stones withal. And his name spread far abroad, for he was marvelously helped till he was strong. But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction. For he transgressed against the Lord his God and went into the temple of the Lord to burn incense upon the altar of incense.
So now we know that's a big no-no. Even though Uzziah was doing good and well, this was his slip-up and his mess-up. He has so much pride in himself, ruling as king over Jerusalem, doing what was expected right in the eyes of the Most High, that he actually took it upon himself and started doing Levitical priesthood jobs by bringing incense to the Most High, thinking that he could do that because he's been doing so well. But that's what it says. His heart was lifted up against him. That wasn't his job. He was not instructed to do that. The Most High still had order. And since he did do that, because he did do that, what happens is the Most High actually strikes him, I believe, with leprosy. Yep, he becomes struck with leprosy, and he has leprosy all the rest of his days of his kingship. So that was the one thing that he messed up on. He took the Levitical priesthood's job and such with that. So he should not have did that. So now, moving on. Sake of time too. What is it? 9:27. Okay, we have a little bit. We may go on. Because, again, there's a lot of kings and there's a lot of details with these kings. We might have to do a part 2 of this. So after so much more time, I'm going to say another maybe 20 or so minutes, we might have to cut it short and do a part 2. But until then, we're going to still carry on with some of the rest of these kings that we have going on left. So Uzziah's son, now his next son's name is Jotham. We could read that in 2 Chronicles chapter 27 and 1.
2 Chronicles chapter 27, verse 1. Jotham was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father Uzziah did. Howbeit, he entered not into the temple of the Lord, and the people did yet corruptly.
So it's basically saying he didn't do that. He didn't do what his dad did, which was, he didn't take pride into himself in going and taking the Levite's job. So Jotham, as we're going to get bullet points, I'm not going to really get too much of the scriptures right now. Jotham, he did right with the Most High. He did not remove the high places, and that's why it was important for you guys to understand what I said earlier. The high places was the main thing, the remnant left over, that was an issue that the Most High had with Southern Kingdom rulership. He didn't want people doing that, sacrificing unto him wherever they wanted. So he didn't remove those places. But much like his father, he still built the infrastructure of Jerusalem. He built gates and walls, and he went to war against the Ammonites. He won, and he got them under tribute, which means that he got them taxed. So he got income coming into the northern kingdom by going into war with them. And his heart, for the most part, was prepared, and he was prepared to do with the will of the Most High. So Jotham ended up dying as a good king to be remembered in Israel, like unto his father Uzziah, save the issue that he did with the temple. All right, the next, and you can read more about him in 2 Kings chapter 15 to 32 and onward. We're going to pretty much go like that from here on and coast through, because we don't necessarily have to do a second lesson. The next king is Ahaz. Since we're in Chronicles, we'll read 2 Chronicles 28 and 1.
2 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 1. Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, but he did not that which was right in the sight of the Lord, like David his father, for he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, and made also molten images for Baalim. So
we see now Ahaz, complete 180 from his father. He did wrong in the eyes of the Most High. And the details that you read about him in the scriptures, you're going to see that he implemented human sacrificing upon the high places, which is, not anything that wasn't going on regardless. So he's implemented that. He made war with the northern kingdom without, he shouldn't even bother them, but he made war with them and Syria, and he became confederate. So his buddy, his nation buddy was actually Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria. So he was confederate with the Assyrians during his captivity. So you can read more about Ahaz again from 2 Chronicles 28, 1 and on, and also 2 Kings chapter 16 and 1 on, and you can learn more about Ahaz. But that's I'm gonna give you these bullet points too. So Ahaz, because he was friendships with the Assyrians, he was completely fascinated by the Assyrian culture, that he abandoned Israelite culture. He actually pillages the Most High's temple and he sells the Most High's valuable, precious pieces of gold and lavers and stuff like that to the Assyrians, and Assyrians, and becomes during his kingdom captive, like actual captives, not winning these battles, to the Syrians, to the northern kingdom, Israelites, Edom, and the Philistines. So you guys can read that about Ahaz's kingship in also as well in, 2 Kings 16 and 1 and on, and 2 Chronicles 28, 1 and on. So next, now, some time dedicated to give with this king, we have Hezekiah. So Hezekiah, he actually was a very good king. We're going to start with 2 Chronicles 29 and 1.
2 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 1. Hezekiah began to reign when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah.
Verse 2.
And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done.
So Hezekiah, the time frame involving with him. Hezekiah did right in the eyes of the Most High. Something to know what happened during his reign. The northern kingdom of Israel finally, without going to the details, was carried off into captivity. They got completely removed out of the land at this time. So he did right like David. He completely destroys all the idolatry out of the land, including the high places. So Hezekiah actually gets rid of the high places as well as the idolatry during his kingship and reign. He has a point in time, too, where he has a standoff with the messengers of Assyria. So you guys can read about that. And Hezekiah, keeping the faith in the Most High and strengthening the people, the Most High actually fights this battle that the Assyrians came up against, not only the northern kingdom and took them away, but they came up against the southern kingdom too, Jerusalem. And the Most High actually fights that battle for us. You know, he makes all of the armies that the Assyrians brought up against Hezekiah to fight against themselves, you know, and die. So then, you know, they flee, they leave. That was under Hezekiah's reign. Also, Hezekiah cleans and rebuilds the temple during his reign and has the biggest Passover since the time of Solomon. And even bringing remnants that were left over in the northern kingdom, even though they got carried away, he invites them to come celebrate this Passover and clean themselves up too. A lot of them don't listen, that got left over, but some of them actually did humble themselves and listen to Hezekiah and comes to the reestablishing of the Passover that the Most High wanted us to keep during that time. So that's bullet points, main bullet points during Hezekiah's reign at this time. The next king we got is Manasseh. We can read that in 2 Chronicles 33 and 1.
Second Chronicles chapter 33, verse 1. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 15 years in Jerusalem, but did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, like unto the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord did cast out before the children of Israel. For he built again the high places, which Hezekiah his father had broken down, and he reared up altars for Baalim, and made groves, and worshiped all the host of heaven, and served them.
So we see now Manasseh does the complete opposite and turning Hezekiah's rulership reign against his head, because Hezekiah had went a step further than most kings did by removing the high places, and now Manasseh, he rebuilds them and everything else that goes along with them. So again, Manasseh, he's very young as a king. He immediately does this evil, and he's noted for being, he did more evil than the heathens that existed in the land during that time. So he was worse than them. This particular king, Manasseh, during his reign and his rulership. So because of that, he becomes captive. The Assyrians capture a lot of Jerusalem and himself as well too. And this is where you see in the book of the Apocrypha, it's called the Prayer of Manasseh. This is where it's recorded that this prayer that Manasseh made, which is where he makes a complete 180-degree turn to following the Most High now. So even though Manasseh did the most wicked, as soon as he got captive and enslaved by the Assyrians, he makes a particular prayer and vow to the Most High to do right, which we read about in the prayer of Manasseh in the Apocrypha. And he starts doing much like his father. He then begins in the later part of his life. He puts away the idols. He repairs the house, and he gets rid of all the idolatry and such like that. The high places, though, they're still there. So that's what Manasseh does in his kingship. So he started off completely wrong and bad, but had a change of heart towards the Most High in his humility and started following the Most High in the last aspect, the last half of his life. So that was briefly spoken Manasseh. So you can read about him as well in 2 Kings 21:1 and onward. The next king is Ammon. Ammon. His name means trained up or skilled. 2 Chronicles 33:21. You don't have to read it, but I'm going to get through these bullet points for the most part with these. Ammon follows the same evil of his father Manasseh. He has no humility, and again, he does worse actually than Manasseh. And Manasseh was doing worse than the heathen already. So now this man Ammon he's stepping it up the game worse than his father, and again worse than the heathen. So during his short reign of him doing that, there's a conspiracy that's made, and he actually gets killed by those that wanted to do right and follow the Most High. So Ammon has actually conspired against, and he gets put to death, by his own servants. So that's the reign of Ammon. You read that in 2 Kings 21:19 and onward, as well as 2 Chronicles chapter 33 and 21 onward, the king Ammon. The next king after him is Josiah. And Josiah is another king noted and important to talk about. Josiah, his name means Yahweh has founded, the foundation. He actually does right. Josiah is very much, as I'm going to get these bullet points, he's in the likeness of Hezekiah. He's one of those great ones that came at the latter end in Southern Kingdom rulership. So he does right for the Most High's eyes. He purges the idols not only in Judah and Jerusalem, but he actually goes up into Israel, the northern kingdom. He starts removing the idols in the high places there as well, too. That's what Josiah does. And he persuades money from the people to restructure and rebuild the temple. And also there's a man named Hilkiah, the high priest. He finds actually the book of the law. So the book of the law at this point in time hasn't been spoken about and taught because of all the going back and forth between the kings and their goodness and their wickedness, the ones that tried to do right by following their fathers. But the actual book of the law was hidden. But Hilkiah finds this book. He gives it to to Josiah, and Josiah implements the orders of keeping the commandments of the Most High to their fullest. So now one of those things with cleansing the Levitical priesthood, along with it, he actually makes the biggest Passover, even bigger than Hezekiah's, since Samuel. So amongst Jerusalem and also amongst the northern kingdom Israelites as well too. This is what Josiah does, briefly. The next king after him is Jehoaz, and his name means Yahweh has seized or caught. You can read about him in 2 Chronicles 35:1, and as well as 2 Kings 23 and 31. Jehoaz, unfortunately, he does evil. He does evil in the eyes of the Most High. And what happens to him, because he does evil with the idolatry and such, he's actually removed from being king by an Egyptian. And and Jerusalem becomes taxed by Egypt too. And his very brief period of rulership, he gets actually set in place by his brother. So Jehoaz does evil. The Egyptians remove him from kingship and set up his brother. And that brother's name is Eliakim or Jehoiakim. He does evil too, much like his brother. And excuse me. Yeah, he does evil, and he's enduring a lot of the curses that Manasseh, because even though Manasseh was humble and repented at the end of his life, he still, it says the sins of the father are going to go upon the third and fourth generation. This guy, Eliakim, Jehoiakim, is actually suffering through the generational curses of Manasseh by going to war with the Chaldees, the Syrians, Moab, and Ammon. So that's under him. And now we have 2 more kings left we can get through, and I think we have enough time to do it too. Yeah, we do. The next king after that is Jehoiachin. So you can read about him in 2 Chronicles 36:9 and 2 Kings 24:8. His name means to establish from H3078. And he does evil in the outside of the Most High. And I'm going to just let you know, all the kings from here on out, there's only one more left, they just continue to do evil. So he's doing evil with the idolatry. And he gets besieged not by the Egyptians, but by Babylon. So Babylon at this point in time has become a super kingdom. And Babylon besieges Jehoiakim's government. And they remove him. They actually remove his whole government into captivity in Babylon. Not all of Jerusalem, but just Jehoiachin's government. They actually get captive and put into Babylon. And so now Jehoiachin's brother is made king by the Babylonians. And his name is Zedekiah or Mattaniah. So now we're on to the next king, the 19th king of Israel. His name means, Mattaniah means gift of Yahweh, but the name Zedekiah that the Babylonians gave to him means righteousness of Yahweh. But he does evil. And now under Zedekiah's kingship, the rest of the majority of the southern kingdom of Israel goes into what we understand as the Babylonian captivity. And his captivity is so bad that he actually gets locked up, chained up, and the Babylonians put his eyes out. So he's blind with no eyes left. So the Babylonians left Jerusalem with the land ransacked. There was, the fields got destroyed, the houses, regular people's got destroyed. Everyone went in captivity. And the only people left over were the poor, which the Babylonians used to take care of the farming and everything, because they were occupying, colonizing the land. And that's the last king of Israel. There was a governor that the Babylonians set into place named Gedaliah, but he eventually he was put to death by a conspiracy too, when he tried to convince the people to listen to the Babylonians to follow their servitude. But the people that killed him ran and fled into Egypt. So we have a lot of southern kingdom Israelites now dwelling in, at this time, Egypt, and the majority in Babylon. So, yeah, we sped through that last part pretty quick, but it's a long lesson. There's a lot of kings, but I hope you guys got a good aspect of it for the most part in the beginning half of the lesson. Unfortunately, I won't be going through too much of the wisdom that deals with these kings, which I did write up, but you guys can always inquire and question online. Come to True Nation and, speak to some of us too, because we do know that information. But that does conclude the southern kingdom kings of Jerusalem and Judah. 19 kings that it was, between doing good and evil. And for the most part, evil. So I hope everybody that, bore with the lesson, buried with the lesson, got what they needed to get out of it, got something, some understanding. Of course, we do advise that you read the stories yourselves, because that's going to be the best thing for you. And with that, we're going to call it a night and say shalom.
Shalom.